Walk down a lure aisle and you'd think that bass can see 40 different shades of green pumpkin. The reality is they really can't. And I think a whole lot of lure colors are designed to catch us anglers before they ever catch a fish. Hey, it's Mitchtram. And here's the thing, right? Color does matter when you're bass fishing. I'm not going to say it doesn't, but bass don't see color the same way that we do. There are colors that they really can separate and see very well, and there are colors that may look almost exactly the same to them, even though they look completely different to us. And what that really means is most of us probably have way more lure colors than we actually need. And we may be complicating things unnecessarily. So I'm going to show you what the research says that bass can see what really happens with red underwater and the four basic color groups that you can use to kind of simplify your tackle box for bass. And one thing to keep in mind, this doesn't apply to every fish species, and we'll talk about that too. So when you walk into a tackle store and look at the color selection, you'll see green pumpkin, pumpkin blue, watermelon red, watermelon candy, June bug, black and blue, and probably 20 other different colors that I'm leaving off that are just slightly different shades of all of those colors. And to us, they all look very different. And I'm not saying really that those differences never matter, right? Nothing is absolute. Different materials can change how light passes through a bait. The flake can add some flash to it. One bait can be a little lighter or darker or more transparent than the other. But this is where a lot of us kind of really mess it up. We assume that because two colors look different to us, they must look equally different to bass. And that's just not how their eyes work. I remember, I don't know, it's been years ago, I was in Bass Pro Shop and there was a guy in there and he was stressing out because they didn't have watermelon red Cincos and the particular brand that he wanted. And we were chatting and I picked up a package of watermelon red with black flake in it as well. And I said, here you go, give these a shot. He looked at me and he said, no, they won't work. So he ended up buying another brand just to get the exact color he wanted, even though he said it didn't have the action of the bait that he liked. And I remember thinking, man, the action of the bait is probably a whole lot more important than whether that flake is solid red or there's some black flake mixed in with the red flake. I didn't say anything to the guy. And this just kind of tells us how locked in we can get on color. I've said this for years, that a lot of fishing lures, or probably all fishing lures, are designed to catch fishermen way before they ever catch a fish. My own tackle box today, honestly, is pretty boring. Most of it is natural colors, whites, and blacks. But it wasn't always that way. When I was first starting out, I wanted the brightest, coolest looking baits out there. Looking back, those lures were catching me more than they were catching fish, for sure. Now just think about it. Like a bass is not sitting down there looking at a lure as it flies by and thinking, man, that sure looks cool. I got to get me a piece of that. The bass is really reacting to whether that bait looks like food, whether it can see it, its movement, and does it look like prey in the water, right? My simple color selection wasn't based on studies. They probably existed. I didn't know about them back then. So I didn't know how a bass sees. They were just colors that I built confidence in because they worked for me over the years. So I kind of figured it out on my own, so to speak. But when you look at the actual research, there's good reason that those simple colors work. Now let's chat about the science a little bit, right? The researchers that have done these studies, they examined the eyes of largemouth bass and found two types of color sensitive receptors or cells or cones, whatever they're called. One was very sensitive to the green portion of the spectrum. The other was sensitive to the red portion. And what they call that is dichromatic vision. We have three main color channels. Largemouth bass, they only have two. The other thing about bass is they also have well-developed rod cells that help them detect brightness, movement, and contrast, right? Especially when the light gets low. Their eyes can actually see about 5 times more, or they're 5 times more sensitive to light compared to our eyes. Now, they also did some research. I don't know if this is the same study or not. I did a bunch of research on this, but they trained largemouth bass to select color targets for a food reward. And this gets pretty interesting. It's kind of like a Pavlov's dog experiment, right? The bass, they did great when the colors were red or green, anywhere in that red or green spectrum. But when the colors changed to yellow or chartreuse from white, they couldn't distinguish the difference. Same thing with blue and black. They couldn't really tell the difference reliably between blue and black. To us, these look completely different. But bass, they really can't tell the difference. And chartreuse, yellow and white performed like the same basic color category. And the same thing happened with blue and black. So that doesn't prove every chartreuse lure looks exactly like every white lure in every lake. I mean, lures have different materials, reflectivity, like transparency and brightness. So, there can be some differences there. But if common sense tells us anything, buying 5 different versions of the same lure simply because one is white, one is like a pearl color, one maybe is bone, and one has some chartreuse in it, it really probably doesn't give us much advantage. And the bass are likely not seeing them much differently. All of those variations probably just give them one basic bright presentation with subtle differences. I think there's kind of 4 functional color groups. So instead of organizing lures by every name printed on the package, I think it makes more sense to organize them by the job they do in the particular water. So the first I think about is like green and natural, right? It's a green pumpkin worm, watermelon baits, kind of a natural craw color, maybe a shad type color. These are just your natural colors. Green pumpkin, it's an obvious example. It just works. We all know that, right? It's not magic. It's just a useful color that falls into part of the spectrum the bass can really separate, while also looking very natural in a lot of different water conditions. Like if I could choose one color, I've said this over and over again, to fish for the rest of my life, it would be green pumpkin because it works pretty much everywhere. Some places it works better, but it works almost anywhere. And then you think about like watermelon, brownish green, and many of those natural craw or bluegill patterns probably live in that same general grouping. If you think about it kind of from a practical grouping standpoint. For most soft plastics, you can probably have one dependable green pumpkin or one natural green to get the job done. You don't need 10 different shades. And then the second grouping is bright. Think about like white pearl, maybe bone, maybe chartreuse. And getting back to that research we were just chatting about, I think of those as like one bright category. They may have some different levels of brightness, transparency, or flash, but I don't treat them like 4 completely separate color presentations. So thinking about imitating shad or creating flash, giving the fish a target like white or pearl is usually what I grab. The third category is dark, right? So this is your black worms, maybe your black and blue spinnerbait, your black and blue jig, your solid black jig, your black and blue lizard. So black, dark blue, June bug, black and blue, they look way different for us than they do to a bass. Their biggest job, those dark colors, is creating a defined profile. Remember, the bass's eyesight is 5 times or around 5 times as sensitive to light as ours. So even when the water's dirty, even when it's getting dark outside, those dark colors create a silhouette. And that's really useful when you think about dirty water, low light, or anytime you want that bait to stand out as a silhouette. So you probably don't need solid black, midnight blue, sapphire, what like black neon, June bug, or 6 or 7 other different subtle shades of those dark colors. Pick one dependable dark color that covers most of that job. For me, my favorite is black with blue flake. If I'm thinking a Cinco, I'm thinking a long-tail worm, anything when I'm going black, typically black with blue flake. Just my confidence bait. So the last one is red in warm colors. Think about like a red crankbait, like this, red crawbait, an orange accented lure, maybe some red worms like that. So this fourth group is the red, and it's the warmer end of the spectrum. In bass, according to the research, they appear to separate red very well when there's enough light available through the water to show that red. And that makes red different from simply calling it another dark lure, right? They can see it. But red changes more dramatically as light gets filtered through the water. And that's where the usual experience gets misleading. You've probably heard like red is the first color to disappear underwater. I know I've heard that over and over and over again. And that's partially true, right? But after more research, I think it's kind of explained badly. Red light is absorbed relatively quickly, but it's not magic. It's not like when it reaches a certain depth, it suddenly just switches off. So water clarity, the amount of sunlight, sediment, algae stain, they affect how quickly that happens. As less red light reaches the lure, it has less red available to reflect, right? So the lure doesn't become invisible, it generally becomes less red and begins to look darker. So a red lure near the surface probably gives bass a very clear signal that it's red. But deeper down, like a deep diving crankbait, that same lure, it may function more like a dark silhouette. And so thinking about that, that's why I wouldn't really choose red based on those charts that say it completely disappears at an exact depth. And I don't have a whole lot of red lures. I fish red a little bit in the spring when the crawfish are molting. It probably works at other times, but that's just when I use it. So with red, that color signal changes, but the lure's still there and the bass can still detect its profile, its movement, and probably some contrast. So does lure color actually matter? Yes, I firmly believe lure color matters, but it's not normally the first thing I would blame when I'm not catching fish. As long as I'm using a lure and the general color range for the water and condition I'm fishing, I don't look at lure color first. You can have a perfect shade of green pumpkin and throw it into empty water all afternoon. It's never going to catch you anything. You could take the perfect shad color and run it 3 feet over the top of the fish if they're feeding on the bottom, and you're never going to get a strike. You could have the right color, but the wrong depth, or the wrong retrieve speed, the wrong profile, the wrong presentation. So before I start thinking about changing the color, I want to know that I'm fishing around fish and I'm fishing at the right depth and I'm using the right speed and general profile or presentation, right? To me, those are more important than getting the exact shade of the color. As long as I have the color that kind of fits that water, that's one of the last things I'm changing. After I've gone through all of those things, then I might adjust the color. So thinking about switching from green pumpkin to black, that can create a stronger silhouette. That's a viable move, in my opinion. Switching from a dark color to a white creates a brighter target. That's a viable color change. Those are meaningful changes to me. But changing from green pumpkin with purple flake to green pumpkin with blue flake or with red flake or with no flake likely has little effect and matters less than we probably convince ourselves that it does. Now, at the beginning, I said, this doesn't apply to all fish because what we're talking about here is strictly related to largemouth bass. So similar fish that have red and green sensitive eyes are the green sunfish and the pumpkin seed sunfish and some darters and whatever those are, right? I don't think we have them here in Central Texas. Maybe we do, but maybe I've just never seen them. Anyway, so it doesn't mean that every freshwater fish or every fish in the sunfish family sees the same way. Trout and goldfish have broader color sensitivity than many fish. Speckled trout, one of my favorite inshore fish to target, can see yellow and chartreuse extremely well. So this varies greatly by species. And I wouldn't automatically assume other bass like smallmouth, spotted bass, the Guadalupe bass, stripers, even like crappie and catfish or any other fish see exactly the same way without doing some research. The thing to think about is, fish, they don't necessarily see every color the same way we do. And I think that's a hard concept for us to really grasp without knowing what it looks like to see the way that fish and other animals do. It's just hard to comprehend. Or at least for me, it kind of is. I mean, I understand it, but it's hard to think of seeing only that way. So here's kind of the check I go through. Before buying another variation, I ask, what different job does this lure actually perform? Does it have more natural action? Is it brighter? Is it darker? Does it provide a red or warm color signal? Or is it basically the same presentation with a different name on the package, right? Don't overthink it. We don't need 30 different lure colors. Think about having a few colors that perform clearly different jobs and then put them in water that actually holds fish. Because the perfect color is not going to help you if you're fishing empty water. Watch this video next, and I'll show you the signs that you may be in that empty water in the first place. So hit subscribe if this kind of fishing information helps you. Leave me a comment telling me which lure color you probably own way too many versions of, or how you've simplified your colors down. I'm honestly curious to know. All right, we'll see you on the next one.